So today is the 1st of October and we're getting our first real snowfall. It's been getting into the low 20s for 2 or 3 weeks now, so it's not a surprise that winter's here, but it's definitely a lot earlier this year than the past couple of years. 2 years ago it was in November when we first got our first snow, so we're about a month and a half early. And I've made 3 or 4 videos that I just haven't had time to post, kind of documenting the carrots and the beets and how everything went this summer. Overall it went really well, and I'm glad we did this kind of test plot because I learned a lot, and we're going to change some things next year going forward. All I've really got left to do is cut the arugula. I want to bring it inside and dry it out, and then I'll try and figure out how to get the seeds out of the pods. Other than that, the soybeans are the only thing left. We never got beans on those, so it's kind of a wash, but they're still adding nitrogen to the soil, so I'm going to cut those off and just kind of let them fall and die onto the beds. I think I might cover the beds with a plastic over the winter. That should make them a little easier in the spring to, I'm going to use a black plastic, and then hopefully by springtime the sun will be on the black. It'll warm up the soil sooner than the ground around it. So hopefully I'll be able to pull that off and then cover the rows up and get something in the ground a little bit sooner than I would be able to otherwise. I got the row covers all rolled up and put away. Today I'm going to get these hoops all stored for the winter, and then that's pretty much it. I got to finish putting the water system away, and I want to get the greenhouse done before it gets too much snow out. Snow on the ground. That's my real priority right now. But I'll just do a quick run around, talk about how everything went, what we ended up with, and what I learned, what I'm going to change going forward. Okay, so I'll start with the beets and the carrots were right here in these three sections. We ended up with about 3 pounds of carrots and just over 2 pounds of beets. So 3 pounds of carrots just from this little 4-foot section, so that's pretty good. And then the beets also, I did a staggered planting a couple weeks apart, and the second planting didn't fully mature. They could have grown a bit more before I harvested. So I think that was due to the cooler temperatures. So I'm going to try to keep them covered next season. I'm going to be a little more diligent about covering them overnight, and then remembering to come out and open them in the morning before it gets too hot is the other side of that. Okay, here's our root vegetable harvest. The beets, we kind of, there's a lot of different sizes. They're all planted at the same time, so a lot of staggered growth for some reason. The 3 different varieties. The carrots, did the Nepali, Nancy's Fancy, and the Scarlet. I think we do these two again. The Scarlet were a little more prone to not straight shoots. These ones did a little better, and these plumped up really nice. And these are the same 3 varieties again, except a few 2 or 3 weeks behind. And some golden beets, and then more red beets. These were all planted a couple weeks before that batch over there, and they I think they did just as good in the same amount of time, which is strange. So really good. I'm going to try and plant carrots as soon as possible next season. I might do these whole beds just for carrots and maybe beets too. They did really well, and I think they'll be a good seller. Here's our soybeans. We did not get anything from the soybeans. They never produced a fruit. But that's okay. They're still a nitrogen builder. They fix nitrogen in their root nodes, so I might just cut the plants off, leave them to die on the top, and then the roots will keep that nitrogen in the soil, and then those roots will break down and release that nitrogen as needed. Here's where the onions were. The onions did really good. What I'm going to change next year about the onions is I'm going to start them a lot sooner indoors. We'll start them in seed trays, and then I'll come out and I'll transplant them. They were spaced. I didn't have the spacing right this year, so they grew too close together, and they didn't get their size that I wanted. They kind of choked each other out, and they were growing into each other, so I'm going to make sure to space them out next year more, and I'll get them in the ground sooner with a head start, so we should definitely get a better yield next year. So the peas did really well. The moose came in and they were the moose's number one favorite was the peas, followed by the beet greens. I don't know if we're going to do peas for the market garden, just because they're kind of a pain to harvest. They mature at different rates, so you kind of have to hunt through the vines to find the mature pods and pick them. And I should have trellised them also. That was another mistake. They kind of grew all over the ground and bundled up, and that made it harder to harvest also. So trellis, if we do them, maybe we might just do them for our own personal consumption. I don't know if we're going to sell them. The arugula did really well. It's got seed. These little pods are full of seeds, so I'm going to try and dry those out and harvest those this winter. The other peas, completely eaten down to the ground by the moose. They were this was the provider variety, and there was definitely a bigger bean, but they were slower to mature, so we didn't really get much off of those before the moose came. And then this is where all the lettuces and radishes were, and really happy with how all that worked out, and we'll definitely be doing more of that. Gonna start it again. I think we need to get more of a process in place as far as starting the seeds in trays indoors and giving them a couple week head start before we transplant them into the soil. I think that will be a much better or much more efficient operation. So overall, everything went really well. Gonna get everything kind of cleaned up here before we get too buried in snow, and get the rows covered with a plastic to kind of keep that the nutrition content in there over the winter, so it doesn't fill with ice and then thaw. Everything kind of gets washed through, I think, when that happens. So that's the plan. Greenhouse is kind of coming along. That's the real main goal for before the snow builds up too much, is to get that closed in so we can have that space inside that's usable. Not necessarily planning on growing anything in there this winter, but I want to start testing out the battery system and everything. I got some plastic over the big compost heap over there. The moose ate all the green manure off of the top of that too, so the roots are still inside though, so by covering it, I'm just gonna kind of preserve it over the winter and let it finish composting. And then in the spring, the plan is to build a 30-foot greenhouse over the top of that, and then we'll spread out that heap, and that'll be our grow bed. And then I have to get this compost heap finished up too. I'm gonna take the fencing off of it, and then kind of turn the heap, take the pitchfork and just tear the pile apart and rebuild the heap, and then I'll cover the whole thing with a tarp and leave it for the winter. Or maybe I'll move it into the greenhouse and I'll use it in there. So since I decided to just take the row covers off of here and not bother with trying to plant stuff this fall, I just didn't have the time. So instead, what I'm going to try and do is I'll cover these rows with this plastic sheeting, this 6 mil thick, 3.5 mil poly sheeting, and I'm going to roll this out and I'll just hold it down with rocks and let it just sit all winter, and then try to get it cleared off in the spring and let it get warmed up and thawed out. And hopefully that works. Hopefully it doesn't do the opposite and keep it insulated and keep it frozen longer than the other ground. But I think it'll work the way I'm hoping. So we'll do this, and then we'll call it a season with the test garden. So thanks for watching, and stick around. We're gonna be doing some other stuff throughout the winter. I'm gonna try growing mushrooms and a few other things. Hoping to get this greenhouse wrapped up here, at least usable, so early spring we can start germinating seeds in there. So yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.